the training panel. Massachusetts wants to maintain primacy for the lead and copper rule revision, so we will be drafting regulations shortly to incorporate the federal requirements. This training and the work that we're doing right now is part of our planning and preparations for ourselves and for water systems so that we can be well prepared for the lead and copper rule revisions. So our training team this morning will be Andrew Durham, Tio Yano, Damon Gutterman, and our partners from our Drinking Water SRF program, the director of the Municipal Services section, Maria Pinnell. I am now going to turn it over to Andrew Durham, who's going to take you through the presentation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yvette, and welcome everyone to the service line inventory tool training. First off, let's do some housekeeping. Please put yourself on mute if you have not done so already. That will make it much more enjoyable for all of us. A heads up that this is being recorded and will be available in the future. And third, about questions and answers. You can put the questions in the chat and we will try to address them as we're going along. If not, if we can't answer them right away, we will have a question and answer period at the end. People should unmute and give us some questions. Or a preferred method of passing questions on to the DEP is through the P-Director email. That will be put into the chat, the actual P-Director email, so people can grab that. The agenda, which is now on the screen, that will be also put on the chat as a download, so you can grab it and use the links that are embedded in it to get to some of this information. A little history here. The lead and copper rule revisions were passed by the federal EPA on December 16th, 2021. Within those regulations is a requirement for community and non-community, non-transient, non-community public water supplies to do an inventory of service lines and the service line materials. This is a full inventory of the public and private side. The heads up on the lead and copper rule improvements, the LCRI. EPA will be releasing lead and copper rule improvements which may change some of the lead and copper rule revisions that were released in 2021, but the inventory requirements will remain the same, and we're trying to get a jump on it because the inventories are required to be submitted to the DEP and the federal government by October 16th of 2024, so about 2 years away. And we know that there's a lot of work on your side and on our side to get these inventories in a format that can be used. So more details on the history of the lead and copper rule revisions in the inventory are coming up in our first section, which is a pre-recorded video. After that, Tio will go through the lead service line inventory workbook. This is a tool that can be used to report your service line inventories to us. He will also go over an optional CSV text file submission, which is essentially the same information that is in the workbook that some systems with some technical savvy will be able to generate this file and forego doing data entry straight into the workbook. After that, he'll go through our lead service line identification application, which is a crowdsourcing app, which could be used by customers within your public water supply to identify and send you pictures of their service lines, which may assist in getting the inventory information that is missing. After that, I will go through the lead service line replacement plan form. This is a form to capture your plans for doing lead service line replacements. This form is required for systems that have one or more lead service lines identified within their system. After that, we will go through funding opportunities to assist public water supplies in these inventory activities. There are monies available and you may be interested in it. And after that, we'll jump into a question and answer section at the end and answer as many questions as possible. Right now, I'll hand it over to Nicole, who will start the video.
Hello, today's presentation is an overview of the lead and copper rule revisions. We will discuss the proposed lead and copper rule revision testing requirements for public water systems. We will give you a background on the new regulation and how systems can get prepared for compliance. The lead and copper rule revisions were issued on December 16, 2021. They strengthened the existing lead and copper rule by expanding public education and customer outreach to empower communities through information, by requiring lead testing in schools and childcare facilities to better protect children's health, and by requiring a public inventory of lead service lines with the goal of getting the lead out of our nation's drinking water. We would like to start with an overview of the lead service line inventory. All communities and non-trans and non-community water systems are subject to this inventory. It should be submitted to MassDEP by October 16, 2024, and all systems have to make their inventories available to the public, and systems serving more than 50,000 people have to post their inventory on the internet as well. So there are systems in Massachusetts that are already posting their inventories on their website. We will leave you with the links at the end of this presentation so you can see which systems are we talking about. So what should be included in the inventory? When developing an inventory, public water systems should include a location identifier. This could be the street address, a block, a customer number. They should include the service line material, identification for both public and private side. MassDEP will also include identification of gooseness and pigtails in their inventory if they're known. And it should include a verification of service line material for each address. The service line material classification is different than the current lead and copper rule. Now there are 4 categories: lead, galvanized requiring replacement, unknown service line, and non-lead. Lead is when a portion of the service line is made out of lead. Galvanized requiring replacement is any galvanized service line that is or has ever been downstream of a lead service line or of an unknown material service line. Unknown are where the service line material is not known to be lead, galvanized requiring replacement, or a non-lead service line. And non-lead is defined by EPA as service lines with evidence that they are non-lead or galvanized requiring replacement. So how often these inventories should be updated? The inventory must be updated when changes are identified in the course of normal operation. However, the public version only needs to be updated when submitted to the state as part of the tap water monitoring cycle, which could be annually or triennially if the system is on reduced monitoring. Lead service line inventories are important because they inform consumers of the material of the service line delivering their water. They help water systems to track the progress toward full lead service line replacement, and they enable states and others to verify whether the tap water monitoring samples are being collected from homes with service lines that are lead. To start preparing for the lead service line inventory requirement, a water system must find and organize the data. They should review the materials evaluations that were used to develop the pool of sampling sites under the current lead and copper rule, all documentation indicating the service line materials, including construction and plumbing codes, permits, and any existing records, and all inspections and records of the distribution systems. What happens if the public water system believes they don't have lead service lines or galvanized service line requiring replacement? Public water systems can demonstrate that they have only known lead service lines, but they have to submit an initial inventory by the compliance date. However, they will be not required to provide inventory updates to MassDEP or to the public. If in the future the system finds a lead service line within its distribution system, it must prepare an updated lead service line inventory on a schedule that will be established by MassDEP Drinking Water Program. Remember, part of developing the lead service line inventory is validating the service line material. This is essential to develop a reliable and accurate inventory. There are different methods that public water systems can use for verification. For example, profile sampling in situations when sampling is needed to determine if the service line is lead, record validations when systems have access to records such as tie cards or inspections and maintenance records. Field inspection. Statistical analysis can be helpful to determine areas or households that are most likely to have lead service line, and lastly but not less important, a homeowner verification. Please note that MassDEP will not require excavation work to determine unknown service line materials by the compliance date unless directed by EPA to do so in the future. As part of our preparation for the revisions, we have interviews with some of the public water systems in the states that are already developing these inventories, and we learn some of the barriers to develop a complete lead service line inventory. So, for example, customer lead service line verification can be really time-consuming for the public water system. They also express the need of a tool that will assist them to develop their inventories. Therefore, the first tool that we develop is a micro-enabled Excel spreadsheet, which public water system can use to input and manage their inventory. The spreadsheet has required fields that are necessary for lead and copper rule revisions compliance, and some optional fields that we recommend public water systems to use for tracking benefits.
I can't hear it.
It also has most of the answers built in, so systems do not need to manually type each answer. This will help to minimize errors. The fields that will be asked for are the site ID, which is an optional field that the public water system can use to identify the site. A location identifier, which is a required field under the lead and copper rule revisions. If the sampling location is going to be part of the lead and copper rule sampling plan. Any identification of goodness and pigtails. If what is the material of the current public service line, and if the public service line material was previously lead. These are required fields. It also asks for the public service line size and the installation date. The same fields are also asked for the private service line part. Once the public water system have entered the required information, The spreadsheet will classify the entire service line for them. And remember, the classifications are lead, galvanized requiring replacement, non-lead, and lead status unknown. This will help public water systems to actually develop their lead service line replacement plans and their lead service line replacement goals. Now, the verification method is a required field. They ask what method was used to confirm the service line material. The spreadsheet also asks for the fields needed to develop the sampling plans. The spreadsheet asks for presence of point of entry, point of use treatment, building plumbing materials, building material installation dates for systems that don't have enough or don't have lead service lines, and if the site will be used as a routine or alternative site. Then, as with the entire service line classification, the spreadsheet will also calculate the tier site based on the information that the public water system will input. Please note that the tier classifications now change. Now, for the lead and copper revisions, there are 5 tiers. This can be really helpful as it will help to minimize errors and expedite the approval process for the sampling plans. There are other optional fields in the spreadsheet. The MassDEP is really encouraging public water systems to use, as like the information regarding lead service line replacements. The second tool DEP is developing is a crowdsourcing application that will allow public water systems to work directly with their communities for homeowner verification by allowing the customers to verify and submit a picture of the service line. This can help to improve and develop lead service line inventory on time while engaging and bringing awareness to the communities about the dangers of lead and lead service lines. Once the consumer submits a report, it will go directly to any public water system that wants to use this tool. They will receive a report similar to the one that is being shown in the bottom of the screen, and the systems will also have an access to a spreadsheet and to a PDF report. Now we will jump to lead service line replacements. Another key deadline besides the inventory is for the lead service line replacement plans, which are also due by October 2024. However, please take into consideration that the EPA announced in 2021 that they will work on the lead and copper rule improvements, which can delay the October 2024 date for submitting lead service line replacement plans. So what are these plans? According to the lead and copper rule revisions, all water systems with lead, galvanized requiring replacement, or unknown service lines in their distribution system must submit lead service line replacement plans to MassDEP in addition to the full lead service line inventory. What should be included in these plans? The plan must include a description of a strategy for determining the composition of unknown service line in the inventory, a procedure for conducting full lead service line replacement, a strategy for informing customers before a full or partial lead service line is replaced, and for systems that serve more than 10,000 people, a lead service line replacement goal rate recommended by the system in the event of a lead trigger level exceedance. It should also include a procedure for customers to flush service lines and premise plumbing of particulate lead, a lead service line replacement prioritization strategy targeting non-lead service line, lead service line replacement for disadvantaged consumers, and populations most sensitive to the effects of lead. And lastly, it should include a funding strategy for conducting lead service line replacement, considering customers that are unable to pay to replace the portion they own. How water system can start to prepare for this requirement? The first step is to start to develop or complete the lead service line inventory, so system can actually identify lead service line, galvanized lines requiring replacement, and any unknown service line. An accurate lead service line inventory will help to develop a more comprehensive replacement plan. Let's talk about lead service line replacement. To calculate the number of service line replacement, the replacement rate must be applied to the sum of known lead and galvanized requiring replacement service lines when the system first exceeds the trigger or action level, plus the number of unknown service lines in the beginning of each year of a system annual goal or mandatory lead service line replacement program. Each service line counts only once when calculating the required number of service line replacement, even where the ownership of the service line is split and both the customer-owned and the system-owned portions require replacement. The number of service lines requiring replacement must be updated annually to subtract the number of lead status unknown service lines that were discovered to be non-lead, and to add the number of known lead service lines that were discovered to be lead or galvanized requiring replacement. The goal-based lead service line replacement applies to water systems that serve more than 10,000 people and exceed the lead trigger level. These systems must conduct goal-based full lead service line replacement at a rate approved by the state, us MassDEP. Only full lead service line replacement counts towards the replacement goal, and the system can stop this goal-based after they meet their replacement goal or after 2 consecutive monitoring periods below the trigger level. Water systems that exceed the action level must conduct mandatory full lead service line replacement at an average annual rate of at least 3% calculated on a 2-year rolling basis. Only full lead service line replacement count towards a water system mandatory replacement rate. Water systems that exceed the action level must provide consumer notification. The information must be provided to customers with lead, galvanized requiring replacement, or lead status unknown. The water system must also provide the consumer with a pitch filter or a point-of-use device certified to reduce lead, 6 months of replacement cartridge, and instructions for use before the affected service line is returned to service. The water system must also offer to collect a follow-up tap sample between 3 months and 6 months after completion of any partial or full replacement of a lead service line. Now, community water systems serving 10,000 or less people and non-trans and non-community water systems are subject to the small system flexibility. This system must implement a full lead service line replacement program on a schedule approved by the state, but that doesn't exceed 15 years. This water system must continue lead service line replacement even if the 90th percentile level is below the action level in future tap sampling. The idea is that this water system must have no lead service line, galvanized service line requiring replacement, or lead status unknown in their inventory by the end of the lead service line replacement program. Let's review the monitoring requirements. These are also subject to revisions during the lead and copper rule revision improvements. Each water system must identify a pool of targeted sampling sites based on their service line inventory. The tier classifications for the sampling plans under the LCRR are changing. For community systems, for example, Tier 1 consists of single-family structures that are served by a lead service line. When multiple family residents comprise at least 20% of the structure served by the water system, They might include this as Tier 1 sites if they are served by a lead service line. Any community water systems with insufficient Tier 1 sites must use Tier 2 sampling sites that are consistent of buildings, including multiple family residents that are served by a lead service line. A community water system with insufficient Tier 1 and Tier 2 must use Tier 3 sampling sites consistent of single-family structures that contain galvanized lines identified as being downstream of a lead service line, currently or in the past, or known to be downstream of a lead gooseneck pigtail or connector. Now, community water systems with insufficient Tier 1, 2, and 3 must use Tier 4 sampling sites consistent of single-family structures that contain copper pipes with lead solder installed before the effective date of the state's applicable lead ban. Sites with unknown service line must not be used as Tier 1, 2, 3, or 4 sampling sites. A community water system with insufficient Tier 1, 2, 3, and 4 must use Tier 5 sample sites consistent of single-family structures or building, including multiple family residences that are representative of sites throughout the distribution system. A representative site is a site in which the plumbing materials used at that site will be commonly found at other sites served by the water system. Water system may use non-residential buildings that are representative of sites throughout the distribution system if and only there are insufficient number of single families or multiple family residential tier sites available. Remember, a water system whose distribution system contains lead service line have to collect all the samples from sites served by a lead service line. The sampling site selected for a non-transient, non-community water system must consist of sites that are served by lead service line. This will be a Tier 1 sampling site. Non-transient, non-community with insufficient Tier 1 must use Tier 3 sampling sites. And non-transient, non-community with insufficient Tier 1 and Tier 3 should use Tier 5 sampling sites. Sites with unknown service line must not be used as Tier 1 or 3 sampling sites. When looking at the highlights of the lead and copper rule revision requirements, for sampling collection, the biggest highlight is the 5th liter at sites with lead service lines. So here, systems must collect tap water in 5 number 1 liter sample bottles after the water has been stagnant for at least 6 hours without flushing the tap prior to the sampling collection. The system must analyze first draught samples for copper when applicable and 5th liter samples for lead. So it will be a first draw 1 liter sample that has to be taken. The first draw sample must be analyzed for lead and copper in tap sampling periods where both contaminants are required to be monitored. In tap sampling periods where only lead is required to be monitored, the first draw sample might be analyzed for lead only. No aerator removal and cleaning or flushing of taps prior to the start of the minimum 6-hour stagnation period. Kitchen bathroom samples for households must be collected from the cold water tap, and non-residential samples collected at tap water from which water is typically drawn for consumption. For the 90th percentile calculation highlights, systems with lead service line, Tier 1 or 2, must use 100% tap samples from lead service line sites. Systems with insufficient numbers of lead service line must use samples from all available lead service line and then use the highest result from non-lead service line sites, so Tier 3, 4, and 5. And water systems without lead service line must use all tap samples collected from Tier 3, 4, and 5. All water systems must make available to the public the results of compliance tap water monitoring data, including the data used in the 90th percentile calculation, and this is within 60 days of the end of the applicable tap sampling period. Now, for monitoring, we talk about two exceedances. One is the trigger level exceedance and then the action level exceedance. The lead trigger level is exceeded if the 90th percentile concentration of lead is greater than 10 parts per billion. Systems that exceed the trigger level must implement the goal-based lead service line replacement program, provide notification to consumers. Water systems with corrosion control treatment must re-optimize optimal corrosion control treatment. A water system without corrosion control treatment must recommend optimal corrosion control treatment. And for the action level exceedance, the biggest highlight are the requirement of Tier 1 public notification and the fine and fix assessment. Systems that exceed the action level still have to go back to semi-annual, complete source water monitoring, full lead service line replacements, and public education. A water system that fails to meet the action level must offer to sample the tap water of any customer who requests it. However, take into consideration that the system is not required to pay for collecting or analyzing the sample, nor is the system required to collect and analyze the sample itself. Exceeding the lead action level of 15 parts per billion triggers a Tier 1 public notification under the lead and copper rule revisions. This means that immediately and no later than 24 hours of the knowledge of a Tier 1 site situation or violation, systems are required to notify and consult MassDEP and provide public notification to consumers. So when does this 24-hour public notification begins? It begins as soon as the 90th percentile value is calculated after collecting and receiving all sample results, but not later than the end of the monitoring period. So if a water system completes the 90th percentile calculations prior to the end of the monitoring period, the system has to complete the public notification within 24 hours of receiving all requiring sampling results and calculating the 90th percentile value. The system has to contact and consult with MassDEP regional offices to determine any additional public notice requirements. During this consultation, they have to receive MassDEP approval for any changes to the areas that are non-mandatory and for the final notice and methods of delivery. To ensure compliance with the 24 hours, the regional office have to be contacted immediately to ensure MassDEP approval will be received on time. Public water systems that exceed the action level should also comply with the fine and fix assessment requirement. The fine and fix is an assessment that is triggered when tap sample size exceed the action level. So the timing of notification. For individual samples that exceed the action level, the water system must provide consumer notification as soon as practical, but no later than 3 calendar days after the water system learns of the tap monitoring results. Within 5 days of receiving the tap sample results, the water system must sample at a new water quality parameter site that is on the same size water main in the same pressure zone and located within a half a mile of the location with the action level exceeded. Small systems without corrosion control treatment may have up to 14 days to collect the samples. Within 30 days of receiving the samples results with the action level exceedance, water systems have to collect a follow-up sample at any tap sample sites that exceed the action level. These samples must be submitted to MassDEP within the first 10 days following the end of the applicable monitoring period, but should not be included in the 90th percentile for compliance monitoring. Within 6 months after the end of the monitoring period, in which the site exceeds the lead action level, water systems have to evaluate the results of the monitoring conducted and submit any recommendations to the state. Then MassDEP will approve the treatment recommendations or specify a different approach within 6 months of the public water system submittal of the treatment recommendation. If the state approves the recommendation, then it requires the water system to adjust the optimal corrosion control treatment process, and the water system must complete these modifications within 12 months after receiving approvals from the state. Any water system which collects find and fix data must report the results to MassDEP within the first 10 days following the end of the applicable monitoring period. The system also needs to certify to the states the number of customer refusals or non-responses for follow-up samples they have received, and any information pertaining to the accuracy of the refusals or non-responses within the first 10 days of the end of the applicable TAP sampling period in which an individual sampling exceeds the action level. Today, we only cover some of the new requirements under the lead and copper rule revisions, but as a summary, it is important to remember that systems have to start to prepare for the lead service line inventory and the lead service line replacement plan as soon as possible, because those are the ones that are due on October 16, 2024 until now. We encourage systems to apply to the different grants the EPA and Massachusetts are developing for these requirements. If you have any questions regarding this presentation, please contact the Drinking Water Program Director at the address that is listed in this presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think you all agree that was a lot. It just shows how complicated this rule is, but the focus today is on the inventory because that is the basis for all these decisions that are coming for all of us. So without a complete inventory and an accurate inventory, it's difficult to move through these regulatory requirements. And some of those requirements may change. So we will be updating and planning some future trainings coming up next year. So stay tuned to that. So with that, we will turn it over to Tio Yano, who will go through the Excel spreadsheet for capturing the public water supply inventories in Massachusetts. This will assist you with best management practices and knowing what's out there and what's in the street. And also it'll assist us in tracking and making the decisions that we need to. Tio?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Tio Yano, and today I'm going to be walking through the service line inventory Excel workbook, as well as providing an overview of the MassLED service line identification app, which is also known as a smart sheet crowdsourcing app. Let me just share my screen here. So the Excel workbook can be found on our website. I'll just post this into the chat for everybody. Actually, Andrew, do you mind posting in the chat? I can't see my chat at the moment. And the Excel workbook can be found under the lead and copper rule revision subheading. And here you'll find all the resources and all the tools that we're talking about today. The inventory workbook is the first one listed here. Currently, we're at version 1.01. This was just released yesterday. We found a bug in the form. So we fix that and release the new version. So if you've already downloaded version 1.0.0, I recommend that you download the newest version. The bug had to do with the calculation of the sampling tier. It wasn't calculating it correctly, so we've pushed the fix out. So once you've downloaded the Excel workbook, you can double click that, and you'll most likely get a warning about whether or not you want to enable macros. The workbook contains a lot of VBA code, and so you're going to have to allow the workbook to run those macros. Depending on the version of Excel that you're using, you'll get different warnings. In my case, it just asks whether or not I want to enable editing. And in that case, I say yes. And enable content. And at this point, all the macros will be able to run correctly. There are some system requirements for running this Excel workbook. We've tested it on Windows 10 and Office 365 Excel version 2203. The workbook unfortunately does not run on Macintosh. We're not able to provide that to you. In addition, once you download the Excel workbook, you're going to want to store it in a location that is not a cloud storage service provider, for instance, OneDrive or Google. The macros won't run correctly if it's being run off of something like OneDrive. You can put this on a network drive, that should be fine. I don't think that you'll run into any issues there, but if you do, please let me know. Most of the testing has just been done while the workbook is stored on a local drive, and that does definitely work. So today, I'll go through the initial configuration settings that you need to make on the workbook, and then as well as how to populate the data, how to validate the data, and then the export that this workbook provides. Ultimately, what we're looking for is a properly formatted CSV file. So we're not asking you to email this Excel workbook back to us. We're asking for a CSV file instead, which this Excel workbook outputs for you. So the first thing you're going to want to do is set up your configuration settings, and most of the actions that you're going to be performing can be accessed through the right click on the worksheet. There are some DEP options. So these are the ones that we've built into the worksheet. And the first thing you want to do is open up the PWS information. And in here, you're going to enter your PWS ID number. Today, we'll just use Beverly Water Department as an example, 303000. And the second question is asking whether or not more than 20% of the structures served by the PWS are multifamily residences. This is important to answer accurately because we use this in the calculation of the sampling tier, which is column V in the spreadsheet. So depending on whether or not you check off this box, the sampling site tier calculation will differ. So in this case, let's just say it is, and we'll save that. The next configuration you're going to want to perform, again, you do a right click anywhere on the sheet, and then you want to set up your validation settings. And basically what this is, the first checkbox is whether or not you want to highlight, after you run the validation, whether or not you want to highlight the cells with errors in them where data needs to be corrected. So in this case, we'll say yes. And then also you can output a file that includes validation errors, because if you need more information about what that error is in that cell, this file will provide that to you. And it'll ask you where you want to save that error file. So we'll just put it here in the downloads where our Excel inventory workbook is located. And then you just click save. So at this point, you can begin filling out the inventory worksheet. When you first open it, it's going to open on the inventory panel or inventory sheet. There is also another sheet called column definitions. And in this sheet, you'll find every single column in the inventory sheet along with the description, whether it's required or an optional field, the valid values for that field, and then a description of that column as well. So you can reference this if you need more information while filling out the inventory spreadsheet. The column, the information in the column definitions sheet is also duplicated in the instructions, which is also available on our website. I believe it's the second one here, instructions, service line, inventory Excel workbook. And so now we'll just go ahead and start filling in a row so that you can see how this works. So the site ID is an optional field. It can be used in the event that you want to say that you have a different data system with a unique identifier for that service location. And you can use this column to link that unique identifier to the row in the spreadsheet. It's an optional field. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. In our case today, we'll just fill this in with some data. The locational identifier, this is a street address. Well, it can be a street address. If you do not want to provide a street address, you do not have to, unless that location is a LCR sampling location, in which case you will need to provide the exact address, street address.
Excuse me, Tio, it's Damon.
Yes.
You might want to zoom in the font size a bit. It's pretty small on the screen.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So in the locational identifier, we'll just enter in an address here. Let's just say it's Elm Street. This locational identifier is going to be used by us at MassDEP to create a unique identifier. So whatever you fill into this column the first time around, you cannot change this data afterwards, because for us to identify the location correctly, we need this to stay consistent throughout your annual submittals. We're not going to necessarily use the exact address, but we're going to create a unique identifier based off of what is in this column. So it's really important not to change this once you've entered it and submitted it to us the first time around. The LCR sampling location, column C, this is asking whether or not this location is an LCR sampling location. In this case, we'll just say yes. And for each of these columns, not for every single one, so column A, column B this doesn't apply, but for the majority of the columns, if you right click in that cell and then go to column options, you'll have the valid options for that cell. So for instance, in this column, it's just simply yes or no. But in a column further down, you'll see that there's a wide range of available options, which mirror the ones on this in column E and column F of the column definitions. So for column D, this is asking whether or not there's a connector currently present. So this is a gooseneck or a pigtail. In this case, we'll just say no. Again, if you right click, you have the options there as well. So you can say yes, no, or unknown. And these are the valid values for that. So the connector material, because we answered no, we can leave this one blank. And then for the current public service line material, so this is the material on the public side. In this case, we'll say copper, but these are all the valid options for that cell. In column G, this is asking whether or not the public service line material was ever previously led. This factors into some of the calculations further down on the spreadsheet. And so in this case, again, right click, and these are the valid options. In this case, we'll say unknown. The public service line size, this is the diameter in inches. So we've provided some options here, but you can also enter other. I don't believe this is required. We'll run a validation to see whether or not that's a required one. So the public service line install date. In this column, you can answer, if you know the exact year, you can enter the exact year, but if you don't know the exact year, you can also answer as whether it was pre-lead ban or after the lead ban. In this case, we'll just say pre-lead ban. Column J is now we're on the private service line material. Again, if you right click, you'll get the options that are valid for this column. In this case, we'll say galvanized. Inches, we'll just skip that. The private service line install date. Again, it can be an exact year, or it can be pre-lead ban or after lead ban. So we'll just say pre-lead ban. And so you'll notice in column M, what's happening is that it's looking at the public service line material and the private service line material, and then classifying the entire service line for you. Column N is the verification method. Currently, we have these as options. If none of these capture the verification method that you're using, you can also select other. And in that case, you'll need to provide a description of that other method. In this case, we'll just put field inspection. For the building type, these are the available options. The options here factor into the sampling tier classification. So in this case, let's say it's single family. And then column Q is point of entry or point of use treatment present. Let's say unknown. Now the building plumbing materials, don't remember whether these are required or not, but we'll run a validation on it to find out. I do know that column T does figure into the sampling site tier calculation, but it can also accept blanks. And so we'll leave that blank for now. And then for the sampling plan location, the available options are routine, alternative site, or not applicable. So in this case, let's just say it's routine. And now to calculate the sampling site tier, you right click and run the calculate sampling tier, site tier. So it'll look at all the information that you've entered up until this column, and it'll calculate that tier for you. Column W, column X, and column Y, which is about the replacement of the material. This is all optional. It's not going to require you to enter anything. And comments as well, if you want to include some kind of explanatory text, or if you want to keep track of something, you can use this comments field. You can also add additional fields, columns on if you want to. So at this point, once you've filled out the worksheet, you're going to right click and you can run a validation on the worksheet. And at that point, it'll complete. And so if you have a lot of rows of data, obviously it's going to take a while to complete. But once it's done, if you selected highlight the errors, you'll see here, we got some errors here. And if we look at, so this is the error file that's produced. if we look at this file, give me 1 second here. So if we look at this file, each line is an error. So R2, it's saying that the field can't be empty and that's required. And also the R2, the material. So there's 2 errors for this one cell. And then for T2 as well, it's required. And then the valid options are there as well. So there's a little bit more information in the error file to help you correct those errors on the sheet. And so once you've corrected the errors, what you're going to want to do is export to create the CSV file, which is ultimately what you're going to email to the drinking water program. If you right click and click exports for submission, you'll get a notice asking you to validate the sheet. If there are errors on the sheet, you can still generate the CSV file. It's not going to prevent you from creating that CSV file. So go ahead and click OK. And then it'll ask you where you want to save that file. And we'll just put it in the downloads folder. I'll hit save. And then this is the CSV file that gets created. And we'll just open this up. And so this is the file that we want from the public water systems. The first line is all the headers. And there are some additional headers that don't necessarily appear in the sheet. So for instance, version, this is just pulling the version number of the Excel inventory sheet. Obviously, if you don't use the workbook, you can leave this one blank, but we do require, however you produce the CSV file, we require that these headers are there because this is going to affect how we import the data on our side into our database. And those headers can be found in the instruction file for the workbook. Let me just bring that up. So starting on page 5, it goes through each of the columns and the header name for the CSV file. And it'll tell you whether or not it's applicable or not for the inventory sheet. And if you scroll down further, there's a section called structure of CSV file. So if you want to use a database or some other system to produce the CSV file, that's fine. Just make sure you follow the rules of the CSV file. Okay, so let me just close some of these windows out. So the next thing I'd like to go over is the Mass-led service line identification app, which is also known as the Smartsheet crowdsourcing app. And that looks like this. And the instructions for signing up, if you want to use it, it's totally optional. If you want to use it, we have some instructions here for how to sign up. We ask that you identify 2 individuals at the PWS who will be responsible for intaking and checking the emails and the notifications that come through the system. And so once you've identified the 2 PWS staff who are going to be responsible for that, if you could just email their full name, provide their email address and a contact phone number, and email that to the program director email address, we'll be able to set you up to use this. And so once you've been set up in the system, what you're going to do is provide this URL to your customers to have them come to this site. It's mobile friendly, so you can use it on your phone as well, and have them fill this out to help you identify their service line materials. And it's a simple form. It just asks for their name, their email address, a contact phone number, and then the street address. So let's just say it's Boston for now. And then the water supplier. So this drop-down menu right now only includes the systems that have signed up to use this crowdsourcing app. If you sign up to use it, we'll include you in this drop-down list as well. So let's just say it's Franklin Water Department for now. Construction year, this is optional. And then we ask them to go to the EPA site here where there's a guide for how to check your service line material, to check your service line to find out what the material might be. And so based on that, they might answer plastic lead or I do not know. Let's just say I do not know. And then what you would instruct your customer to do is to take a photo of their service line and then to upload that through this form. Just looking for a photo here. Give me 1 second. Okay, so let's say they took these photos. They'd be able to upload one or more photos, and then they can send a copy to themselves as well if they'd like. And then they would submit this, and what would happen in the back end is a notification email will be sent to those 2 staff at your PWS. And then also you'll be able to log into this smart sheet system, and all the submissions for your system will be in a spreadsheet that only you have access to. We're just providing this as a means to help you get the inventory from your customers. It's totally optional again. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. So I think that's it, Andrew.
All right, thanks, Theo. So more information, more stuff. The goal of this whole effort is to get public water supplies ahead of the ball on doing their inventories and capturing their information, being able to pass it to DEP so we can do our piece and reporting back to EPA after October of 2024. We realize this is a big effort, and that crowdsourcing tool may assist you or it may not. That's totally optional, but we figured at least we might be able to help you capture those inventories through the public's help. Let me share my screen here, which will give us the next piece of this training, which is the lead service line replacement plan submitted to the DEP. As you can see from this description here, this will summarize what your lead service line replacement plan is to get rid of those service lines, which is the goal of the whole EPA's effort on the lead and copper rule revisions, is to get rid of all the lead in the ground. This is not intended for enforcement purposes. It's just to capture what's going on out there so we know where to put resources and potentially future assistance. Any system that has one or more lead service line or galvanized requiring replacement must complete this form and report it to us by October of 2024. The form is pretty general. It captures the basic information about the public water supply, system owner or system management, who's preparing this, whether you have a consultant or someone else assisting you or someone at your system.
Excuse me, Andrew, it's Damon. We're not seeing your screen.
Oh, sorry. You seeing it now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I apologize. I had not done the last click on the screen share. So this form is available online. It's another Smartsheet form. It is in the agenda. There's a link to it. And as I said, this is a form where we're capturing information on the lead service line replacement plans for public water supplies. It is required for systems that have one or more lead service line or galvanized service lines needing replacement. It captures basic information about the public water supply, the owner, the preparer. Sorry for the scrolling, but I'm going to be scrolling through this and trying to get us on track here. It captures information about the total inventory of number of service connections, number of lead lines, galvanized, etc. And it goes into the replacement scheduling considerations. It asks you, are you going to target certain populations, sensitive populations, etc., within your community first, or whether you will be doing it by when you're doing main replacement on the street, etc. It also gives an opportunity to provide text on your program. It goes into emergency replacements if there's a leak in a service line, or if there's some other emergency work, how will you deal with that? What portion of the service lines in your system are owned by the supplier? So, a lead service line replacement, according to the LCRR, is a full replacement. It goes from the main up to the meter. If your town or if your system has a problem with getting access to private side service line replacements, and whether it's a legal issue or whatever issue, a full service line replacement or a service line replacement will not be counted unless it's a full replacement. And we realize there's a lot of difficulty out there with some communities on whether they have access or whether they have funding or whether there's refusal by the private side replacement. And we go into the replacement goals, what percentage that you plan to replace and on what kind of schedule. Some information on disposal of the lead service lines. Communication to individuals that have lead service lines and the replacement has not happened yet. There is a requirement to communicate with them about the potential dangers of lead, exposure to lead, and that has to be done on a regular basis. Information about a map, whether there's a map available and available to the public. And then the financing, whether you are offering any financial help or covering the costs. I've been around the state a little bit this year, and I've seen different strategies by different systems. And but typically, giving some financial incentive to the homeowner helps a lot to get this done. Whether you will be providing filters to customers with lead service lines or filters to customers post-service line replacement before the testing ensures that it's clean. And you'll submit the copy. These can be submitted and updated. So if you need to update this after you submit it the first time, the system will accept those. So that's the lead service line replacement plan for systems and how we plan to capture it. Systems with any lead service lines are required to submit one of these before October of 2024. It's also a requirement for any funding. So the DEP has committed to assisting public water supplies with the inventory activities, whether you're getting ready for, going out looking for, you need help with the Excel template or creating the CSV file for the DEP to report your inventories. These activities can qualify you for assistance through the Drinking Water SRF program. They're offering 2 programs for lead service line inventories and replacement planning programs to assist public water suppliers with complying with the LCRR revisions. The planning loan program will offer 100% loan forgiveness if you complete all the actions within your application. I go down to the bottom. The applications and instructions. The links to this web page and to the application are on the agenda that was provided in the chat for today's meeting. Eligible activities for funding. It's for the inventory for both public and private side lead service line inventory activities, whether you are planning to do in-person verifications, sending staff into people's homes, doing, let's say, vacuum excavation to take a look at the service lines, any of those types of activities, or even setting up, the crowdsourcing app, monitoring the crowdsourcing app, or some other application that you can collect information on the service lines. We do, and we have heard of systems around the country using modeling. So they put in all the information they have about your service, your system, and the buildings and the ages, and et cetera, and they can fairly accurately predict whether a lead service line exists at these structures. It is probably the least reliable method, but it's a good first cut that could be used at systems that do not have a lot of information. They do not have tie cards. They don't have the information available readily. So modeling is one of the options and can be included in this loan program. The replacement program also will be addressed, and funding will be available coming up. Take a look. This is the actual application form for lead service lines. So the application for financial assistance through the state revolving fund for lead service line inventory and replacement plans. In order to get the funding, you need to ultimately submit the lead service line Excel workbook or acceptable data file, CSV data file with the information for your system. There's the lead service line identification application. That is optional. If you don't think you're going to need it and you don't plan to use it, we recommend you don't sign up for it. but if you need that tool, it can be included and is part of this application. You will need to submit a lead service line replacement plan summary form, that smart sheet I just showed. This application includes the links to all those. It's a standard SRF application, and if you need assistance with it, we have staff available. Other assistance that's planned, the DEP will be contracting with some technical assistance providers to assist small systems below 10,000 population, with gathering the inventory information and reporting it to DEP. More on that to come. Those people have not been put in place yet, but we will be offering those resources to the public water supplies to assist in gathering their inventory information. Now that is all I have now. And if we look back at the agenda, we are ahead of schedule, but I believe we have some questions that people may want to ask. So I'm going to throw it back to Nicole and see if there's any questions in the chat, or if people want to unmute and ask questions, please, in an orderly fashion, introduce yourself and ask your questions.
Yeah, this is Damon. If you can see the reactions portion at the bottom of your screen, it's a little smiley face with a plus on its head. You can actually raise your hand and then we'll call on you. That might be easier. Alexa, go ahead and unmute.
Hello, everyone. I am just curious, can you elaborate on this, the topic of modeling to identify what's in a system? Are there programs and resources out there to help us with that already? Or would we be setting up our own model for that?
Alexa, we have been approached by a company called Blue Conduit. Blue Conduit was involved in the Flint water crisis, and they developed this modeling algorithm, and it is proven to be fairly accurate. There are companies out there that do this, and your SRF funding may cover or assist in covering the cost of such a modeling contract that you would have. I think that developing your own would probably be, number one, cost prohibitive, and then we would have to review whether that meets the standards. Well, we don't have any written standards, but we would need some evidence that it is accurate enough to be acceptable.
Yeah, okay. So Blue Conduit, you say, is the company who's got this.
I believe there's another one. I'm not pushing any one company or the other, but the other one I've heard about is I think 120 Audit is also doing something similar.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
You can look around, and before you start and contract with anyone, please notify us that that is your plan and that we would be interested in looking at the track record and how they're doing this stuff.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic.
This is Yvette. I just want to say we do not promote or endorse any particular company. So even though we have mentioned this name, you basically have to go out and find out about it yourself. And just making that point, we do not promote or endorse any company.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Maria, can you answer the question from Jennifer Peterson about the $20 million in the Acts of 2022, Chapter 140?
Can you please state the question?
Yep, sure. It just says, when will the $20 million funding authorized in the Session Laws Acts of 2022, Chapter 140, be made available to public water systems?
Okay, I know that the legislature passed that a bill, I believe sometime in August. And as far as I know, the program has not been funded. It is tied to the capital budget. And I hope that it will be funded in the near future. So I'll keep you posted on that. But for now, the Clean Water Trust has not received those funds.
Yeah, and there's a couple questions about other modeling efforts. Do they come to the SRF program to discuss if they're acceptable, or do they come to the drinking water program?
Yvette, what's your take on that one?
Can you repeat the question, Damon?
Yeah, there's a couple questions actually on other modeling efforts, either GIS-based or other predictive modeling, and they want to know who do they come to discuss those models.
They should send a request to the Drinking Water Program at program.director-dwp@mass.gov.
Thank you. I can answer Steve Heffler's question. He asks, is the POU filter handout required whenever a lead service line or galvanized service is replaced, or only if there's an action level or trigger level exceedance for the system? So it's a little bit of a mix. The POU is actually an option for small systems that exceed the action level to comply with the lead and copper rule revisions. There is a picture handout. So if that's the point of use handout that you are talking about, that is required when you do a lead service line or galvanized service replacement. One of the sort of qualifiers I have to put on all these answers is that EPA has not locked in all the parts of the lead copper rule improvements that they will change. So we don't know about the things like the Brita filter type handouts, the POU handouts, if those will change in the new rule. You can certainly look at the current lead and copper rule revisions language to see what's required as of the current language. And then I would certainly encourage you and look for training from us on the lead and copper rule improvements, which is slated to come out before 2024. Katie, I'll put the email in the chat. Oh, it's right below. Nicole did it, and so did Tio. That's the General Drinking Water Program email address. So Eloise, your question about if you have no evidence of any lead service. So the rule does allow systems that can document that they have no lead service lines to submit a statement to that effect rather than a detailed inventory. It's essentially, you have to convince us you've done the records review to support that statement. Mike, go ahead and unmute yourself. You have your hand up.
Yes, Mike Nelson from Fuston O'Neill. Thank you for taking my question, and thank you for the presentation today. It's very helpful. Follow up to Jen Peterson's question for Maria. The application for financial assistance for the lead service line inventories was released in June of 2022. Did I hear you correctly that that has not been funded? So the application package was released, but and applications are rolling in, right?
Okay, there are two $20 million fundings that are separate. These are not the same. The $20 million that's right now funding the 100% principal forgiveness loans are coming from the BIL funding, the lead service line removal funding that we just were awarded by EPA this year. So those funds are we have those funds already. And also from the water infrastructure fund transfer that we did a while in 2019. So those $20 million are in place and those funds are available for the applications. I believe the question that I answered that Jennifer had was about the new funding that is going to be available for environmental justice communities that the legislature passed this past August, providing $20 million to support lead service line removals. If that was not the case, Jennifer, please clarify.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. That's very helpful. And my last question is there a website or a resource where we can periodically check to see if applications that have been submitted have been approved by the board?
Yes, I have been getting a lot of questions on that, and the general response is that after every single board meeting, the Clean Water Trust releases a press release with the information on the loans that have been approved and what they are for, like PFAS or lead service lines. So I would encourage you to go and take a look at those press releases. But if you have a specific question on a project, reach out to me and I might be able to assist you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Jen did put in the chat that she was correct. It was a question about the brand new funding that the legislature authorized.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up, a new question for you, Maria. Can you confirm potholing will not be funded as part of the Drinking Water SRF lead service line planning program?
As you know, that approach is very expensive and is more consistent with a construction project. It is discouraged because we do believe there are better approaches to identifying lead service lines.
Thank you. And then a new question as well. When are these lead service line planning program applications due, and when will funds be dispersed?
The application, we are accepting applications. We rolled out the program on July 1st. So applications can come in at any time. It is a rolling application and we'll accept the applications until the funding is spent. So I encourage you to submit your application as soon as possible.
Thank you. David, Karen, your hand up.
Dave Karen with the Williamstown Water Department.
Thank you.
I just want clarification now. If there's a galvanized line on the resident side, but you know that you have replaced your side with copper and removed the lead gooseneck, does that galvanized still have to be replaced?
Yes. So the way the rule is written, if the galvanized was ever downstream of lead service line, and it sounds like that's the scenario you're spelling out, it is considered galvanized requiring replacement, because during that life when the lead service line was there, lead could have leached off that portion and seeded into the galvanized portion.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then Amy, you asked what is potholing. I think it is the same as vacuum excavation. It's essentially a small hole they dig down to the service line to visualize it. Any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing anything else new in the chat, and I think we answered everything as we went. As we said, we're going to be, collecting all these questions into a Q&A document, including the verbal ones. So we'll publish that sometime later once we put it all together.
I want to thank you guys for joining us today. We had less than, about 200 or so that stayed in the meeting. I want to remind you, as Damon said, about the Q&A document that we are going to put on our webpage. We want you to send all your questions in through the program director email. We will respond promptly. And I want to let you know how much we appreciate you working with us, as together we work towards getting ready for the LCRR. Thank you so much, and keep the questions coming, and we plan to have more training early next year.
Yeah, and I'll just end with the one question I answered in the chat. You really should send any questions to the program.director-DWP email address. We will direct it then to the appropriate staff. So it could be a financing question, it could be a rule question, it could be one of these tool questions. Sending it to our general email means that someone will always see it every day and get it to the right person.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, we will collect questions, and if they seem relevant for the whole community, respond through either a broadcast email or through In the Main. So we recommend that people pay attention to that In the Main newsletter that comes out bi-weekly. It's very important and contains a lot of good information. And thank you for today.
Yeah, we'll let systems know when EPA proposes the lead copper rule improvements as well, because it'll be important to see what portions they do decide to change in the LCRR. Okay, I'm going to capture the chat.
Okay, it seems like we're all done here. Please feel free to continue to send in your questions and enjoy this beautiful fall day. Thank you very much.